Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I have a full card breakdown for you for the PFL World Tournament Finals. The PFL doesn't get as much attention as the UFC and the MMA community, but there is some real talent within the PFL. We have former fighters from the UFC that are finishing off their careers in the PFL. You also have some up-and-coming talent that we've seen some people transition to the some fighters transition to the UFC, and they've done quite well from the PFL. And we see a lot of those type of matchups here today. We have the up-and-comer against the former star from the UFC or the retired star. There's a few underdogs that were former UFC fighters you're going to find on this card, and maybe you might be able to recognize their names. But if you like the fight breakdowns, you like making some picks, and you like betting on MMA, this is the channel for you. So make sure you like the video, subscribe, and stay tuned and follow along. And with that, let's get into the first fight of the day. Alright, so we have some special graphics for the PFL. Where do I want to move myself for today, guys? Right here, alright? I'm going to sit right here, right in the middle. Make myself a little bigger. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. This is perfect, right here. Right between him and him. Anyways, do the breakdown. All right, the first fight. We have JP St. Louis versus Tyler Ray. This is a catchweight bout at 175. Both men made weight at 175, although I expected Tyler Ray to come in the bigger man. He usually fights in at 185, whereas JP St. Louis has been fighting most at 170 recently. But hey, both men came in at 175, and they actually measure up quite evenly. It shows a 2-inch reach advantage, 2-inch height advantage here for JP St. Louis. Not exactly the case. They look like they measured up pretty well in the face-offs. What do I want to break down here? What do I want to look at? Yeah. JP is definitely the faster, better athlete, has great cardio, strong wrestler, and has a slick choke package. He has the submission guillotines, the arm-in chokes, the rear naked package. Doesn't really go for those Kimura or the joint locks, and I kind of like that, especially in a wrestler, because those opportunities present themselves more. And usually when you're going for a joint lock, you're giving up position over submission. Not necessarily the case with some of these other submissions, like when you're looking at the guillotine or you're looking to secure... Actually, no, that's bad. But the rear naked choke, the DARS, whatnot, and he has a pretty good choke package. On the other side, facing off against him we have Tyler Ray. Tyler Ray is the more powerful and aggressive of the two fighters, but the aggression usually leaves him open and exposed. It opens up and exposes the weaknesses in his game because he's not a really well-polished fighter. There are opportunities to exploit him, and they come up quite often. And as you get to the higher level in mixed martial arts, it's really about how many mistakes and how often do you make them. And at the highest level, at the championship level, as soon as you make a mistake, someone's going to exploit that mistake. But at this lower level, sometimes people you might get away with it for a while, having holes in your game, because you're not going up against the level of competition that can actually exploit that. In this fight, I do see that JP St. Louis is going to be able to get Tyler, because they both want to wrestle here. They both have a strength in the wrestling. The difference is JP St. Louis is the better wrestler. So because of that, I think he'll be able to stuff Tyler Ray's takedowns. I think he will be able to get some of his own takedowns, so he'll more or less dictate where this fight takes place. And these gentlemen have already fought before, if I haven't mentioned that already. They fought in 2017 where JP got the win by guillotine choke in the first round too. So I expect Tyler Ray to keep that in the back of their mind. But that was 2017, 8 years ago. These are very different fighters. But I expect it to play out very similarly. I think Tyler Ray, like the guillotine was there because he shot a sloppy takedown. I think his takedown, he's going to be more aware of that guillotine threat because of what happened last time. But I still think JP would still be able to work the better grappling, the better wrestling. He'll be able to stuff anything coming from Tyler Ray's grappling threat, and if it stays standing, JP St. Louis I think definitely has more of the threat in the stand-up than Tyler Ray. Yeah, the better grappler here. Give me the better grappler to dictate where the fight takes place. I don't know if I necessarily like a finish here, but I do like JP St. Louis as the side. And with that, we'll get on to the next one. Next up, we got Josh Silveira versus Murad Ramazanov. Murad Ramazanov. I'm going to call him Murad. All right, Josh and Murad is what we're doing for this breakdown. So with Josh Silveira, he's slightly taller, the bigger, bully pressure in the clinch, has the cardio edge, but has shown holes in his game. He looks old, unfit at weigh-ins. Ramazanov, though, chain wrestler, but he fades after the first round. He has gas tank issues. He's lost twice to Shamil Musayev, but he's a superior grappler and a superstar athlete. So it makes sense because if you're going to be grappler versus grappler and it's going to be a very wrestling heavy fight, well, the more athletic, better cardio, more fit wrestler is usually going to come out on top, right? And that's exactly what Shamil Musayev is. He is the better wrestler compared to Murad Ramazanov, and plus he's more technical as well. So that's how that, and they fought twice, and he's lost twice to him already. He gets takedowns, but struggles to do any real damage with them when he does get them, and I'm talking about Murad Ramazanov here. In this matchup, Ramazanov is the smaller man, but can land takedowns easily. Can land takedowns early. Silveira accepts bottom position over Ramazanov, but I don't know why I'm having my notes here. Sorry, guys. Ramazanov, smaller but can land takedowns early. Silveira accepts bottom position. Oh yeah, so Silveira's a jiu-jitsu nerd and he's a little bit unfit. So early and often he will try to fight that grappling, but he might accept bottom position. But later as the fight goes on and Murad starts to fade, if he can't get those takedowns, Silveira's still there. Not that he offers too much in the striking. He does have six knockouts, but it's against more of those tomato cans on the regional scene. So take it with a grain of salt. This is a very tough fight to pick. I know Murad is the favorite, a minus 270 favorite. Seems a little steep of a price because Josh Silveira has fought a quality competition. I believe he's also fought in the UFC. I could be wrong with that, but he's definitely fought all throughout the PFL, Bellator, his whole career. He has a lot of experience with 19 professional fights. And he has the threat of the submission. And if Murad starts wrestling lazy late, there could be a finish here. But then so I can't say inside the distance because that's the Silveira angle, but Murad would probably like to grind this to a decision, so it's hard to pick a side on that. And on the other side, if you just want to pick a side here, well, Murad would grind out a win, might get a finish, but he also could fatigue trying to wrestle, and he might fail against a pretty established grappler. Or even if he gets a takedown, Silveira's wise enough, has nifty jiu-jitsu, can keep himself safe. You know, like where's the finish? But Silveira could get the submission finish. Murad could burn out. So it's hard to pick a side. I would like to lead Murad, but I'm not putting any money on this fight. That's essentially the breakdown here. Next up, we got Sergei Bilostenniy versus Karl Williams. This is an interesting fight. I'm going to start off by saying I am going to lean Karl Williams here. And when he was in the UFC, I was fading Karl Williams quite often. But in this matchup, I kind of like him because he's fought the better level of competition throughout his career. Yes, he's 10-3, and he hasn't looked great lately. But he lost his first fight in the PFL. I don't have it in front of me exactly who he lost his last fight to, but it was a decision loss. And before that, he was in the UFC, and he had a loss in the UFC, and he got cut. But before that, he was winning a couple of fights against low-level competition. And that's kind of what you can expect Karl Williams to do, just beat the low-level competition in the UFC. And that's why I guess he got cut, because they need to make space for the division. But at the same time, this is exactly the type of fighter that Karl Williams beats. Because if Sergei Bilostenniy was matched up across from him in the UFC octagon, I'd probably be betting on Karl Williams. And that's because Karl Williams is a reliable crotch sniffer. And for those of you who don't know what that means, it means he pushes forward, he clinches you up in the wrestling, he'll try to initiate takedowns, but he spends most of that time in no man's land between almost taking you down but not really have you taken down. And that's called crotch sniffing because the other person just spends their time trying to get back up. You're not doing any real damage, but you are controlling because how can you say the other guy's winning? He's not doing anything. He's not throwing punches. He's just trying to stand up. And then you're also doing nothing, but you're on top doing nothing. So that's crotch sniffing. And Karl Williams could crotch sniff his way to a win here because he's never been knocked out. Sergei Bilostenniy is coming in here, knocking out cans on the regional scene. He's going to expect to knock out Karl Williams. Karl Williams was hard to knock out even in the UFC. I don't think he has any losses by knockout. Yeah, he has no career losses by knockout. He's very resilient. I don't think Sergei Bilostenniy is of any UFC caliber that anyone of Karl Williams has faced in the UFC. And I think he's a step down in competition from his previous fight in the PFL. So, that being said, because I'm getting Karl Williams, the ex-UFC fighter, as an underdog here, in what I expect to be a slow, heavyweight, sluggish, ugly fight, Let's make it Carl Williams ugly. Let's give me Carl Williams by decision. I think that's plus 220, but him by money line plus 160 is good enough. Because I think he will neutralize any of the real striking threats from Sergei by simply crotch sniffing. And then Sergei is not going to counter wrestle. It's going to almost neutralize all that striking. He has a 75-inch reach, but Carl Williams has a 79-inch reach. And then on top of that, he's looking to wrestle. I think there's a perfect opportunity to take the dog here. If Sergei wins, it's because the fight went the distance. Carl Williams wasn't able to get any takedowns. Sergei was able to find moments where he was able to land a couple of shots, and because of that, he gets the damage. He gets the moments in the fight, and that's what the judges will award him. That's how Sergei can win this fight, but that's a very small dice roll when you look at it, because he has to win in a very lucrative situation. Because the other side of it's, let's say he's not finding moments and it's almost all stand up. I don't know if Sergei has the cardio to just be trying to... he can't finish Carl Williams, so I don't know if you'll be able to push the pace and put the pressure on Carl Williams, keep on his back foot for 15 minutes, because we don't really see that happen to Carl Williams. He's just very boring, not fun to watch, crotch sniffing. But that might secure the bag here, and I think it does. So give me Carl Williams. Next up, we got Rasul Magomedov versus Guilherme Viana. This is a setup fight. Look at those odds right there. Minus 2,500 and plus 1,200. Don't bet this fight. You have an issue if you're betting this because, again, this is still low-level MMA overall. This is the PFL, and this is the undercard for the PFL. Not saying these fighters are low-level. Rasul Magomedov is definitely not a low-level fighter, but they brought Guilherme Viana into this league just so Rasul Magomedov could get this absolutely devastating win that's about to come in here. Viana's 9 years older. He's much slower. He does have some grappling wins, but he likes to play off his back, and he doesn't have the wrestling to dictate where this fight takes place, which Rasul Magomedov does. And Rasul Magomedov has insane top control. He's going to have leverage because he is 6 inches shorter in this matchup. And the guy's a thick dude, and he has a gas tank. So I think we're just going to see him sit on Viana all day long. Viana could be tough enough and just doesn't look for the way out, doesn't tap, doesn't really give up any positions because I think he's slick enough in the grappling where he can keep himself safe when he finds himself in danger. He can find himself back in those secure and safe positions by working his legs, getting his hips engaged. I think this becomes a boring decision, but then at minus 2,500, it's insane because I feel like if a fighter's ever more than minus 1,200, there has to be a significant finishing upside there. I don't see a significant finishing upside for Rasul Magomedov, although I don't see any path for victory for Guilherme Viana. Therefore, this is a no bet. This is call the helpline if you feel like you must bet on this fight. Moving on. We have the fight between Impa Kasanganay and Andrew Sanchez. This is pretty good because Andrew Sanchez actually is formerly fought in the UFC. I think he has a win over Marvin Vettori as well, back in like 2016 or something. So the guy's not bad. He's just on the back half of his career. He's 37 years old. He's definitely slower in the striking. He's been knocked out 6 times out of his 8 professional losses. And they're just keying him up here to get knocked out by Impa Kasanganay because Kasanganay has been shaping up to be quite the star for the PFL and kind of a poster boy for them. He did really well last year in the tournament. He did lose to Fabian Edwards, so I think this is trying to build him back up to be their star. And they brought Andrew Sanchez here to essentially get knocked out by Impa Kasanganay because there's a clear speed disparity in this matchup. I think Impa Kasanganay finds the chin. He could drop him, and there's a club and sub chance here, so don't just run and smash Impa Kasanganay by KO, because he could drop him and then look to get the sub on the ground. Because even if the fight wears on, I feel like the fight's going to really take a toll on Andrew Sanchez more than it's going to on Impa Kasanganay. We've seen Impa Kasanganay engage in these, high-pace fights for the whole 15 minutes. We saw a lot of cage wrestling as well in the Fabian Edwards fight, so even when everyone does try to slow it down, he is able to get back into the open there. Give me Impa Kasanganay by finish. I kind of like him in the first round, but there's a good enough value just for him to get the finish over Andrew Sanchez. Probably, I think, minus 120 for him inside the distance. Moving on to the next one, we have Bryce Meredith and Lazaro Dayron. These are pretty even odds, and the line's getting even tighter closer to the start of this card because they're both undefeated fighters. They're both grapplers in their own right. We have Lazaro Dayron, who was part of the Cuban grappling team, or he trained with the Cuban grappling team, so really strong wrestling background. The Cuban national wrestling team. What am I saying? Cuban grappling team. It's the Cuban national wrestling team. And then Bryce Meredith, in his own right, was a collegiate NCAA wrestler. Now, between these two, one of them can strike and the other one can't. The other guy just wrestles and gets takedowns, tries to secure top position, doesn't do a whole lot. He's like a Dagestani baby version. Like we have a Dagestani at home. You get Bryce Meredith. Not exactly like a Bryce Mitchell level, because Bryce Mitchell, I think he's starting to put the striking together a lot better. But Bryce Mitchell is much more competent with the grappling, how to bring and kind of put it all together in the MMA form. Bryce Meredith is almost like a American wrestler that you just put into the cage, and he'll throw like a jab and a hook out there every now and then. Not a jab and a cross, a jab and a hook. And that's kind of his whole striking package. And Lazaro Dayron, we know he's not going to get tired. We know he pushes forward. We know he's really strong. We know he's trained with insane athletes his whole life. He's been built up for this moment. We also see that he can get finishes late and he does not fade. I think, and we've seen Bryce Meredith start to fade as he starts to, get takedown after takedown, but then his opponents are able to get back up. So he isn't able to always keep his opponent down. And then the intensity, the timing of those takedowns starts to really slow down, and he's not as successful later in those fights. I think in this fight, as he starts to fade, we're really going to start to see this go from an even fight early to Lazaro Dayron's going to start taking over late, and more recently before the judges have to submit their scorecards. And that's why Lazaro Dayron, I think, wins by decision. He might even get a late finish. So if you want to look at that late TKO, sprinkle something on that to maybe get like a big little payday. There's a chance Lazaro could get a finish by TKO late against Bryce Meredith, but I do like him by decision. Him already, there's enough value on him by money line. I think it's minus 110 or minus 120 on some books right now. So that's great value. I would just take the money line, to be honest. But if you want to squeeze the fruit for more juice, take Lazaro Dayron by decision, because I think there's going to be a grappling heavy fight. And then the only way a finish will start to manifest itself is if one of these fighters starts to break down from damage or starts to deplete their gas tank. I do see that happening to Bryce Meredith over Dayron, but I don't necessarily see that happening for sure, is what I'm trying to get at. Moving on to the next fight. Oh, we have Alexei Pergande versus Ethan Goss. Yeah, this is another fight where they're just feeding Ethan Goss to Alexei Pergande. Pergande is 9 years younger. He is 2 inches taller, but at the face-off, it looks like he was 4 or 5 inches taller than Ethan Goss. He just towered over him. But I do want to say this. Ethan Goss does have slick submissions, but he's fighting absolute tomato cans on the regional scene. This is not a guy who has a PFL Bellator type of resume. This is a guy who's coming straight off the backyard regional scene. And Alexei Pergande, although he's been fighting on the PFL, he's also found the regional scene, doesn't have a significant kind of resume of opponents he's cleaned through. But he's doing exactly what he needs to do in these wins. He's controlling, and he shows that he has amazing fight IQ. He's younger, he's faster, he's bigger. He is very confident in the grappling, and that's kind of Ethan Goss' way in this fight is, hey, let's try to submit this fighter and get him out of there. But look at those cauliflower ears. Does that guy look like he doesn't know how to roll? His ears are just, he's fine. He's fine. All right. Just take Alexei Pergande. Not a whole lot of value here. I'll take him by finish inside the distance by TKO or by submission. But again, it's kind of risky, because if Ethan Goss just goes on full defense for this fight and decides like, hey, I'm just going to use my jiu-jitsu, like I know I'm going to get taken down and I'm just going to stay alive and I'm going to burn 15 minutes. Yes, I'm going to lose every single round on the scorecards, but hey, at least I survived this fight. I got my payday and I got to go home, because he knows what the deal is here. He's being put here to get beat. But I think Pergande gets the job done. He knows what the call of the hour is. And I think he gets a club and sub is kind of my guess here. But it's not really worth betting this fight. Moving on to a light heavyweight bout between Sullivan, Cauley, and Antonio Carlos Jr. I'm going to let you know right now, this is another UFC underdog or a former UFC fighter that I'm going to be taking on this card, because Sullivan Cauley's a minus 165. In his previous fight, he was a plus 300 underdog to Phil Davis, a 40-year-old Phil Davis. Phil Davis ended up losing that fight because Phil Davis tends to, from time to time, just not show up to his fights. And he looked good early for about 2 minutes. Then he kind of just did his Phil Davis thing where for 4 or 5 minutes, he kind of just stalls out in the fight, where he just kind of stands there, does this little lean, jab. And then I'll just kind of stand there, lean. And that's what Phil Davis did. And this guy was able to steal on the scorecards. And some people still think Phil Davis actually still won that fight. Sullivan Cauley is a minus 165 line is a gross overreaction to that fight because Antonio Carlos Jr. has 6 career losses. Of those 6 career losses, 3 were in the UFC. They're consecutive. Boom, 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 boom. He lost 3 fights. He lost to Ian Heinick, not the best loss. Lost to Uriah Hall by a split decision, so that aged really well because Uriah Hall is a great loss to have. And then he lost to Brad Tavares. But this was back in like 2017. So this is not old Brad Tavares now, who's still winning fights in the UFC, might I add. This is Brad Tavares, who was in his prime and who was fighting for the title. That's who he lost to, Uriah Hall and Brad Tavares, back all those years ago. And then he's lost about 1 in the PFL since. And that's kind of been his career. Yes, he's 35 years old, but so is Sullivan Cauley. There's no real height disparity here. Antonio Carlos Jr. definitely has the reach advantage. He does use it to set up into the grappling, but he usually just charges in. But he is very hittable, definitely hittable. But even if he gets hit, his opponent jumps on top, boom, initiates jiu-jitsu. And that's the key to success here, the difference in jiu-jitsu. In the last fight, the line had factored in that Phil Davis was going to initiate a lot of takedowns on Sullivan Cauley, which he did. He only got 2 or 3 when they expected a lot more. So the lines had factored in that there was a grappling disparity between Sullivan Cauley and Phil Davis. That we saw it in the fight, but then Phil Davis stalled out on activity. He was still able to secure 3 takedowns. He shot for 4 and secured 3 of them against the fence, and they were simple takedowns. Antonio Carlos Jr. has better grappling than Phil Davis. He also is far more aggressive than Phil Davis, and he's hunting for the finish. I think this is a parlay buster for people who are casuals, but you're not a casual because you're here watching a YouTube video to inform you, to make informed decisions on where you're going to put your money so you get paid and so you don't look like a goddamn casual, because this is going to beat all the casuals. Because I say Antonio Carlos Jr. not only wins this fight as a plus 140 underdog, I think he gets it done by submission, and I think he even gets it done by submission in the first round. Give me Antonio Carlos Jr. as a side, and give me Antonio Carlos Jr. by submission. And if I'm feeling extra spicy, I am going to take that first round. To be determined if I take it. You'll hear about it if I do, for sure. Moving on to the next fight. Oh, Alexandr Romanov, a former UFC fighter. I am not taking this guy. I do not like Alexandr Romanov. I was so high on this guy when he got into the UFC because he was nasty. He was fit. He was young. He had amazing grappling. He knew how to go for the kill. He would just maul people like a fat Kamzat. And then since then, he just became fat. And that's it. He just got really overweight, had no cardio. This guy's 5 minutes of solid grappling and then bust. And if somehow he can't take down his opponent, there is no path for victory because after 5 minutes, he doesn't even want to be there anymore. And that's what's going to happen in this fight because Oleg Popov comes from Fedor Emelianenko's fight team. They grapple. They're kind of good at this thing called Sambo out there. So yeah, Alexandr Romanov has a solid Sambo background from the country he's from. Sorry guys, it eludes me. But Oleg Popov has been training with the goats of the goats in Sambo. These are the guys, like Fedor himself beat Abdul Manap's students. These are the Dagestanis, Khabib Nurmagomedov's father. So that's the quality and the caliber and the pedigree of grappling he's coming from. All he has to do is, even if it does get taken out, he just can't get finished, but avoid takedowns for 5 minutes, the first round. After that, Alexandr Romanov is a fat punching bag that's just standing in the octagon that will just try to lean and put his weight on you. If you know how to keep moving, get his weight off of you, stay off the fence, don't let him clinch up. You could piece this guy up until he wants to quit. Then he'll just fall on his back and let you finish him because he does not want to be there. Alexandr Romanov is a quitter. Alexandr Romanov should not be getting any of your money. Go with Oleg Popov here. Moneyline, I think, is enough juice at minus 190 because this is still a tough fight overall because Alexandr Romanov is a talent, and if he ever does show up in shape, locked in, and wants to actually be there and win, he could do it against most of this roster. I just think Oleg Popov is just that wrong opponent because he knows how to neutralize all of Alexander's strengths, and plus he has cardio to go the full 15 minutes, and we've seen his success at this level already. Give me Oleg Popov, money line as a side. And also, I would probably take Oleg Popov by KO, late round 2, maybe round 3, or just the KO overall. Give me Oleg Popov. On to the next one. And finally, the main event for this PFL fight card. We have the middleweight fight between Fabian Edwards. That's right. He's the brother of Leon Edwards, UFC former welterweight. Yeah, former welterweight champion. Apologies. His brother's here, the middleweight champion right now, and he's going to be fighting against Dalton Rosta. Rosta had a really good fight in his last one out. This is the hardest fight to pick on this card because at plus 180 and what I've seen out of Dalton Rosta, I kind of want to take a shot at it. I think Fabian Edwards wins this fight 6 out of 10 times and the reason I say that is because Dalton Rosta likes to pressure forward, get you up against the cage, throw shots, or shoot for the takedown, secure that takedown against the fence. We saw Impa Kasanganay essentially try to implement that same game plan against Fabian Edwards in their last fight. He tried to push him forward, and when he got him forward, Fabian Edwards, much like his brother, is very good at neutralizing wrestlers against the fence because he can turn them and put them against the fence. So the next thing you know, they thought they would get you up to the fence and then start using their energy, start securing that takedown, start locking, getting their hands in position. But what happens is they push you back, they get there, and all of a sudden now they're fighting for position, and now they're against the fence. Now they have to use energy to fight themselves back out. And then as they're about to work again, boom, he turns it back around. So you saw in that last fight, Impa Kasanganay almost abandoned pushing up and doing that fence work against Fabian Edwards. But the way he approached it at the beginning of the fight looked like that was part of the game plan. So Fabian Edwards forced him to abandon his game plan quite fast. Now, it makes sense why that is the game plan of their opponents, because when you look at the way the Edwards brothers fight, it's very similar in their game stylistically. They rely on the takedown defense to avoid the ground entirely, like the floor is lava. They want to implement their striking, and they have perfect control of that no man's land in the space and the striking. Watch the fight between Impa Kasanganay and Fabian Edwards again. As Impa Kasanganay is forced to abandon that grappling and anything against the fence and actually indulge in the striking, you'll see Fabian Edwards actually make sure he manages that 3-4 inches of space between them. Every time Impa thinks he inches in and he's going to get inside that, you see Fabian Edwards make the slight adjustment. He moves almost his back first, and his back foot steps, and then he repositions and his shoulders slide. But he just moved out of that range again, and Impa notices it, and then he has to keep inching forward, and it looks like a very boring fight, because it looks like these guys are just kind of playing pitter-patter and dancing around the octagon, but it's almost impossible to get that perfect spot you want against Fabian Edwards' range, because that's literally their whole game plan. That's what they practice. That's what they are masters of. You beat them by just wrestling them into the ground, and that's why they treat the floor like it's lava, because they can't really do much. All they can do is get back to the feet and go back to their game plan, and if they can't return to their feet, there's not much else to the game plan there. I don't know if Dalton Rosta has it in him to get Fabian Edwards down repeatedly and hold him down there. I think he'll get maybe one or two, maybe that, but I think Fabian Edwards will get right back to his feet. And then I see Dalton Rosta eventually starting to fade because he is jacked. This guy's incredibly jacked, and we've seen him slow down in fights, especially later in the third round. And Fabian Edwards looks good, looks sleek. He doesn't use too much energy. He's very efficient in the way that he fights. I do think Fabian Edwards wins this fight. I think he wins it by a boring decision that looks like every single one of his other wins and like his brother's win. But at plus 180, and then if it's a decision win for Dalton Rosta, there's some more juice there. So it's worth looking into. I just don't really see it. Fabian Edwards, I'm probably not betting this fight, to be honest. I'll probably go the distance because I think they're both very durable. I don't think either guy goes for the finish. Fabian Edwards isn't very deadly or very dangerous by any means. Dalton Rosta is the more dangerous of the two fighters, but Fabian Edwards has amazing defense and is able to avoid those dangerous positions. So yeah, Fabian is the lean. And that wraps up the 10 fights on the PFL fight card. But I went, much like I did for Dana White Contender Series, for those of you who were there. And you know what? I need to fix my mini-me here. I need to get some of my respect back. Oh, there we are. Okay. So for those of you who follow for Dana White Contender Series, our very first inaugural video, we made a 5-fight parlay of all the 5 fights on Dana White Contender Series, and we nailed it based on the picks on the video. It was a 20-1 parlay. So you want to go back and revisit something similar here. There's 10 fights on this card. I went ahead, took my 5 best strategic most value plays, and I put them together on another ticket, and this one pays 25-1. So if you do want to tell, you enjoyed the videos and you like the breakdown and you think there makes some logical sense and this might play out like the script, like I did for Dana White Contender Series, I called every single fight to a T, not just the result, it's how every fight played out. I was aware and I knew before the fights. So if you want to tail the mystic and you want to make some money off of it, these are the picks. Go ahead, tail. Hopefully make some money, because if we do, you're definitely going to hear about it, because I love sharing when I make money. And more often than when I make money, I am so happy when everyone else makes some money. We all eat, because this is coming straight from the sports books, right? They make their money just taking. You know what that's like. So it's now our turn to eat. And it's great when we can all eat together. So that's where I'm coming from. Again, if you enjoyed the breakdowns, you like seeing more of this content, really encourage you guys to make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. It'll keep me motivated. It'll keep me coming back. It'll keep me making more content for you guys and breaking down these fights. I do want to focus a little bit more in the PFL Dana White Contender Series space, as well as the UFC. But I think there's a lot of content creators already in the UFC market space. So I want to make sure I draw attention to the PFL, because I think there's an opportunity to really highlight and promote some of these younger fighters. And it gives them a platform as well. So give them that recognition, build up their brand. And who knows, right? So with that, thank you. Like, follow. Appreciate your time. See you next time.